Okay, we're gathered here for a pre-proposal meeting with regards to Teresa Jenkins and her proposal for study. We'll begin this conversation with a brief kind of overview of the topic and what prompted the emergence of this particular topic. So that said, we'll begin with Teresa just giving an introduction to what we're going to talk about our study.
Okay. This study is relevant right now in the field of education because we have a changing culture and we have a need for independent schools to address the absence of racially appropriate curriculum, teaching pedagogies, and those things within the culture of the school to ensure the success of African American girls. The changing climate within our culture says that we have a higher percentage of children of color coming into independent schools, and those schoolhouses need to be appropriate for their learning process.
That said, what do you see as the purpose of your study?
The purpose is to give independent school communities strategies and techniques they can use to improve their culture to be more inclusive of African American female students. It is important for all students to be successful, and with that comes a certain responsibility of the school to respond to the needs of all of the students within that building.
We have a framework here that we've been working on to develop. Would you care to guide us through, talk us through that framework?
Okay, the Black Girl Success Model is a culmination of a connection between the positive development model and some other theoretical models that I've found helpful in trying to understand what it takes to be successful, just period, but then also specifically for African American youth. So from that collection of frameworks and theories, Dr. Robinson and I worked through what the elements of each of those were, and then we pulled from that themes that were important. So from that has developed the Black Girl Success Model, which simply is for an African American girl to be successful and to have a positive learning experience, to be displayed as a confident student and to be seen as a true African American student in terms of her racial identity. These 7 things need to be in place. So the school needs to have a critically conscious environment. The school culture needs to be reflective of what her needs are. There needs to be a strong school-home relationship between the family and the school. The student needs to have a strong sense of belonging and a strong racial identity. That racial identity is one that is developed at home as well as within the schoolhouse. And then also, it needs to be reflective of a very specific Black girl's experience. And finally, it needs to reflect that there will be student resistance, but also so that's not a negative, it is a positive. And so they need to expect that, but then they also need to know how to handle that. And so if the independent school community works on those 7, then they will create an environment that is going to create a successful African American female student who will then have an increased academic and occupational trajectory for her own personal success.
So if we follow along with the order of the document that we have received, after the model, we have our 4 research questions. It's on page 5. And we've also constructed a general outline of the literature. Luckily at this point, Teresa's been able to collect how many articles so far?
Nearly 100.
Nearly 100 articles. And she's incorporated those into the outline that will comprise of the literature review. But the literature review begins with the purpose of the study and then kind of rephrasing of the research questions, a guiding question that will lead the entire literature review. And it will be integrated into the literature, into the theoretical guide. So the theoretical model that we're proposing will follow the literature review. And as you see, she has, starting at Roman numeral 2, the different areas and highlights and subtopics and the literature that's attached to a particular study. Beginning on bottom of page 8 to 9, you see the makings of the methodology, which is one of the things we really want to get your approval on. And it's going to take a phenomenological design, and we'll talk a little about population. Tell us a little bit about the population that you'll be.
So the population that I'm going to study would be African American female graduates from around of independent schools, K-12 independent schools from around the country. I did a preliminary snowball survey just to find out who I could reach, and I received over 100 names from that survey. From that group, and they are from New Orleans, Washington State, Portland, New York, Massachusetts. So we have a good population of women from all different places in the country. So it won't be just the southern area, which could kind of skew our findings. So my goal, I have actually here are the women that responded. So I've kind of divided them up by state and where they went to school, and from that we'll just do a random sampling to see who's available to respond.
And
excuse me, and we have graduates from 1972 until 2018. So we have a span of years. Did I say that right, Dr. Bradley? What year did you, was it 1972 or 76?
Did I graduate?
Yes.
74.
74. Okay, so it's 1974. I was way off.
Okay. I'm trying to say I'm the oldest one in that sample.
Yes, ma'am, you are. And in case you all don't know, Dr. Bradley is the first African American graduate of St. Mary's Episcopal School. She was the first African American student to integrate the school.
so what we're going to do is kind of take a brief pause here before we go to our proposed timeline and open up the conversation. What we think, what we can, how we envision the study to go, any ideas of how to enhance what we put before you and begin to think about. So I'll start, and then we'll go around, beginning with Dr. Green, Dr. Missenford, and Dr. Bradley, and then I'll kind of close out before we go into the next phase. So I think, in my estimation, I think there's tremendous potential to really put together a significant piece of work here. I see a phenomenological study present. I think there's enough literature to create a literature paper. I also see kind of a comparative. If we take different groups of black female private school graduates and do a comparative to see if there's been change since I guess new economic educational reform. So if there's been like a post No Child Left Behind, a pre No Child Left Behind, we can see kind of generational changes or commonalities in the study. And I think, of course, there is a phenomenological objective to this, seeing what is the lived experiences of African American women in private schools. I think one of the things we kind of ran into a snag on is they're also titled as independent schools, but we decided to use the language of private schools because it's easier for us to understand. And if we're consistent with that, we'll do that. We'll keep that language going. But those are my things that I see at this moment. And I'll let Dr. Green add in any questions or comments they have at this point.
I think it's a rich study. Looking at the life experiences of individuals who have matriculated through these independent schools would give us some rich data to determine what aspects of the school needs to be in place now in order for current students to graduate. Do we need to make any changes? Do we need to make any recommendations to leaders of these schools in terms of how to structure the schools so that I would raise one question. How would you, looking at your research questions, how do you connect them to the framework? How do you connect the research questions to the framework?
Okay, so the research questions, the nature and essence of the schooling experience, I'm trying to understand what pieces of these elements show up in my responses from the, because this is not a model that's been tried and true. This is what my research, this is what my literature tells me. This is what I pulled from the literature, and so I also want to understand the influences that. So another, what influence, meaning were there microaggressions within their school experience? Did they feel a sense of isolation? And did that impact their current professional trajectory? And then number three, I want to understand from my questions, we'll kind of address each of those 7 to find out what did they experience in terms of resistance, or were their familiar relationship with the school. And then I think it's always, for me, it's good to understand what do they think worked, from that experience.
So when you say you've done these articles, you've read these articles, and from the literature review, are these the components that surfaced out of the literature review?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm connecting. So when we get to chapter 5, and we explore what we found, then we can go back in chapter 5 and compare and contrast what we found with this schematic, and that speaks to what currently exists in the literature.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. As everyone else has said, I think this is exciting, and I think it's exciting because and it leads to a couple of questions. So again, the thing I love about being the outsider coming in, I get to ask these questions in a sense. But as I was reading it, and I'm so excited because one question, and I guess we'll get to this through the dissertation too, but maybe I just wanted to have an idea to hear. But exactly who or what entities will be your audience? And the reason why I ask is because as I read this and as I hear, even thinking about what Dr. Green just asked about, where's the literature is coming from, who we know who needs to read this book, but whom do we write this to make them pay attention? Because oftentimes the people around the table aren't the people who are leading the independent schools or asked to be there. So I think that that was one of the questions, like how do we get this into the hands of those individuals?
And I think I have a unique position because I exist within that world already.
Right.
I'm a parent, but I'm also working at this school, and I've noticed recently in my conversations as late as last night, I was at this event, the Princeton Race Review Award event, and I saw Mayor Warden and I saw Mr. Flockler, who is over the Community Foundation, and he's on the board of MUS. And so we were talking about. I'm always talking about this research, and we were talking. He said, "They need to hear. My board needs to hear this."
Right.
So I believe, as a representative of a person within and outside the table, I'm at the table, but I'm also. I'm not in the club. I bring a unique perspective, and I think Dr. Green taught me this probably 3 years ago in part of one of our first classes about understanding self. have to understand that I'm in a unique position because of that. So my goal is to share this information with independent schools, their boards, their school of faculty. My intention is to spread this to all independent schools that I can gain access to. And I think because of my relationship with the National Association of Independent Schools, I've already done a presentation at the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools on the desegregation, the diversity and inclusion and desegregation with segregation academies.
Right.
So I think my job, and I see it as my mission,
Yes.
and it comes across in my personal life and my professional life.
Right.
I'm going to make sure that this information is shared to whoever will listen.
No, I love that. I think I want that to be part of the discussion.
Okay.
And it may, I mean, it's not just something to infer. I think that, because that's the thing, I like, this has to be, it has to be disseminated, and it has to be, and I guess the other part of the question, and I'm sorry, Dr. Green, you wanted to say something?
No, I wanted to support that point, because some of our metropolitan schools, such as, and I named Collierville, and see, they could benefit
From this
some of the
exact same
content
information.
that-
Right. I don't think it's just going to be independent schools.
Okay.
Right.
And I think as late as yesterday with the, and I don't know if you saw this, Dr. Bradley, but within the state of Tennessee passed the voucher
Yes, I was
system.
going to ask that question.
And so I actually emailed my head of school today, and I said, I hope we have a plan to address what our policy and procedures are going to be to address these incoming applicants.
Exactly.
But I also see this as, if you're going to take that money, then you need to make sure that the culture that parents are trusting you to educate their children is going to actually help their child, not hurt. And one of the outside articles that I have in the back of my head is, I'm not going to pay you to hurt my child. And so that's one of the articles in the back of my head that
you can send that one to me.
Yeah. No, and basically that's really what I mean, we have choices.
Yes.
And we need you to step up your game with educating my child.
Right.
And that means that you're not going to just get away with ignoring her. And that's why the title is what it is, Invisible in Plain Sight.
No, and I love the title. I'll say this with the audience, because the next question I had was about, and this was toward the end, how will a have vouchers impacted this increase? When I think about that number, so that goes to what you said about this impact of policy. But not to belabor the point, I just thought that the audience is so important, because I see this as being a study, Teresa, that should be required reading for every person who's in educational leadership. I think it should be required reading. I'm thinking like textbook, because this information, just as Dr. Green says, it's of course, we're using the idea of independent schools, but we need to think about these independent school districts. And of course, you and I know also well about that, and about the same mentality, and about this. So that was the only reason why I really wanted to emphasize, and I loved your response, because I think that's so important. For the individuals who may not have to read this should be the ones to have to read it. And so with you already spreading the gospel of this by telling people my board needs to know this, then how does it get ingrained? So I'll stop there. That was one thing. And then the other thing, it was just a question. You've answered it also, but I think you'll do it again. When I looked at your research, the outline of the research that you've done, and I'm looking at I'm sorry, you all, I left my glasses in my car, but section 4, when you have parents, and you and I have had conversations. So I asked the question that's like send me the article, but I just circled it, how and why do parents make the choice to enroll their daughters within these spaces. I don't know. For me, and maybe it's just because I'm thinking about my own. I'm bringing my baggage to this as a reader, as a parent, as an educator. I know it's about student success, and maybe you all can help me. But I almost want. I don't know. It's like I need the parent. I need some kind of discussion. I would like to see where the parent's voice comes in a little bit.
I did have a parent component to this. I think that's the second part of this.
I can see that.
I actually had a parent focus group as part of this, because I think it's important to have the parent voice. and actually one of my previous papers did cover a little bit more about the parent,
Okay.
how parents make decisions,
Right.
make educational choices, and what factors into that. However, that's actually a whole nother dissertation.
I can see that. That's why I
Yeah.
was like, but
And so I had to,
had to
I
kind
had
of
to, I had to make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do plan on incorporating parents, but probably not to the level that you would like to see.
No, I think
And
that'll be
so-
okay, whatever
yeah.
you do.
But
I
then
think it'll be fine.
but to that point, when you do your protocol, which is not here, maybe you could include one question in the protocol, that would speak to parental, let the parental voice come across in terms of pupil selection. Why did you choose to send your child to this school?
Right.
Some
You know,
think through it.
you're reading my mind again, because that's the thing I'm thinking, was there a discussion? You know, and part of that, because oftentimes there's some students who lead their parents to the decision, which may happen in the case with this, especially with Tennessee and implementation of this voucher program.
Right.
Then oftentimes you think, well, who's leading the decision?
And if I'm
Parents, the
asking, if I'm only talking about African American, the black girl, then
Yes.
maybe I ask them, were they involved in the decision
That's,
to?
I think that
to-
would be,
okay,
yes,
okay.
I think that will help me see whether there was this.
Okay.
So that's all I need. The other
Okay.
study, the other book, you say that one for later. That's
Okay.
wonderful, but this
And
is
I'll tell
great.
you two things. One thing, in doing this outline of what we did and aligning the research you had, we were able to see areas where there needs to be more.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And parents
Particularly
is-
that parents
yes.
needed
So
definitely
that's your
literature
second
there.
text. That's excellent.
The second thing is that I've been doing a lot of work lately on Black homeschool movement, and it kind of follows the same kind of decision making of why am I taking my children out of public schools and placing them in my home?
Yes.
You know, and it may be something that public schools need to realize. This can happen to you.
And it
You
is
know?
happening.
And it is happening,
Yeah.
and there actually is an increase, one of the side pieces that I picked up is there's an increase in African American parents making different educational choices that are actually more aligned with homeschooling and with returning to their neighborhood school where there actually is more African American representation in the faculty and staff.
Yeah.
So, because parents are realizing that, I mean, I had that experience yesterday, and in fact, it's one of the comments I'm going to make when I meet with my head. I walked outside of my office, and this little 2-year-old African American girl that I don't see ran up and hugged me. And I said, she needed to see me and she needed to make contact with me, and that's important because she doesn't have anyone else that she sees Brown every day who is in an authority figure who can show her love in a way that only she and I understand. And so people who say that it's not a big deal don't get it. And that's what the board member from MUS last night said. They think that everything's okay. I said, you can tell them that I said everything's not okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
So
very
we'll
much.
wrap up with Dr. Bradley.
Yes, I just want to say that the proposal is excellent, and I'm very excited about this study. I had a couple of comments. Some of them are very technical, some of them are substantive. But on the title, I love the title too. But the APA recommends a title length of about 12 words. And so maybe consider eliminating C and D and just starting with lived experiences right after the poem, just a suggestion. Also, maybe your research is phenomenal.
It is.
Maybe considering cultural appropriation theory or misappropriation, however you want to look at it, and also adding a little literature to support your decision to pursue a phenomenological study. Also, I'm in agreement with everyone else. The who cares is a huge part of this study, and maybe amping that part of it up in your purpose. There are people that you know should care and I know should care, but they don't know they should care.
Exactly.
So just maybe strengthening that part of the purpose, the who cares part. Let's see. Also, consistency in language is pretty important as well. And I noticed that you went back and forth between African American girls and black girls. So maybe making a decision which one you want to use. The same as the independent schools and private schools. settled on private schools, yet your language still refers to independent schools.
Okay.
And you're gonna really need to define that, operationalize that as you proceed. Because, so there won't be any confusion about what you're referring to in the study.
Okay.
Let's see. I made some notes. Oh, on the sample size, I think you said 10. Do you think that that's going to allow you to reach saturation? Do you think 10 is enough, or maybe a range of 10 to 15 would?
Yeah, in general, I think a lot of phenomenological studies have a sweet spot between 8 and 12. We can put on our viewport potential of 15,
Okay.
and if we discover through collection that we may need more voices, or if something comes up in some of the earlier interviews, we have that right to kind of seek more voice.
Okay.
Um,
So put 15.
yeah.
I just know if there's any way we can avoid having to deal with IRB too many times.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Definitely best.
Absolutely.
Also, because this study is kind of personal to you, you're going to want to really be cognitive of threats to validity.
Yes.
Okay.
So, you're going to want to identify those threats and then figure out in advance of collecting data how you're going to address those threats. Maybe keeping a reflexivity journal or member check-in or peer debriefing, or just figure out what your threats are. It could be descriptive validity or theory validity. Interpretation validity may be a big one for you because you've experienced this from a parent's perspective, and you know people who've experienced it, who've lived that experience.
Right.
And so you have to be careful of any assumptions that you may make about the results of the study and the interpretation of the data. So those are my suggestions. But I think it's a great study. I am excited about it personally because I lived it.
So, in kind of wrapping up what everyone has said, Dr. Green mentioned this is a rich study. We need to really focus on who needs to be hearing this. Recommendations to leaders. I have added on recommendations to teachers, but also recommendations to those who prepare leaders and teachers. So this is something that teacher preparation programs and leader preparation programs need to pay attention to, because it does add a voice that we generally tune out. I'm presently reading a book called The Privileged Poor, and realizing that there's a whole group of students that we ignore when we speak about black students. We just assume that you're off in private school, you're off in independent school, you're off in a boarding school, you should be okay. You know? And then that's completely not the case. So I would add to just identifying those who make a strong connection between research questions and the framework, and also include one question protocol to enact parent voice. We'll go deeper on that. Dr. Vincent Furr, once again, focusing on who will be the audience, and then extending that possibly, maybe in a significance of study, how choice will be impacted by this information. And then, of course, focusing zeroing in on parents on how and why parents make this choice. We can try to tease that out in the interview and data collection. Dr. Bradley, once again, think about reducing the title in alignment with APA, and the possible infusion of cultural appropriation theory, and aligning particularly in the methodology, some literature on phenomenology. I'm already thinking Mustakis and a few other people that I have. And also consider going up to 15 participants and identifying threats to validity. I can tell you, Dr. Bradley, Teresa has a good core group here at the University of Memphis. There's 4 doc students who are currently in the same position right now, and 2 staff that are kind of working in support with them. We meet on Saturdays and things like that, and we can make a peer debriefing team. I already have in the plans for Teresa that whenever she develops her interview questions, that she actually has that peer debriefing team actually rate the questions and we take the highest rated questions and we write that up in a manuscript of how these questions were derived and how they were scored. But also putting in, and you said that just a periodic journal noted, that would be great for the book.
Yes.
And some peer debriefing like moments. So we meet like Saturdays once a month, we sit down and actually have a conversation about what are you seeing and what are you finding and what does it mean. Now, I've looked at this, and of course, we want to follow as close as possible the traditional dissertation model, but I see in here an opportunity to develop several manuscripts in the making of this. So what I would like for you to bear with me on this one, as I explain to you the idea.
Okay.
What you will receive as a proposal will be a traditional proposal. You have a chapter 1, an elaborated chapter 2. The lit review will be the basis of a literature paper. So you'll see maybe 100 or so articles in that, a real teasing out of the literature in all we do. I'm also thinking a theoretical paper on this model. So there could be a supplemental theoretical paper going along with this. Traditional chapter 3 that has a methodology will work into then 3 subsequent papers after that. The phenomenological study, a fictional narrative. It's done a lot in literature.
Yeah.
Where we take the experiences of everyone and we ask a lot of sharing your experiences and telling us stories in the data collection. And we create a super story of a African American female private school student.
Almost like what Du Bois did with The Coming of John.
Yes, and what Richard Wright did with Bigger Thomas.
Exactly.
Bigger Thomas was made out of 9 people he knew growing up.
Exactly.
So we can have a research based on that. And then the comparative piece. As far as a intergenerational comparison of African American private school females. And then of course closing with the significance of the study, the recommendations on who, what, why, and where, despite the fact that they will be present in each of the article pieces. But we could very well walk away with 4 pieces that come out of this, and when we reconvene for the proposal, we'll see where we are with that and your recommendations on how to proceed going forward based on what you've seen and read. Any thoughts on that? Objections?
On the comparison piece, this could well be a future study and maybe a recommendation for a future study, but I'm curious if there's a difference regionally.
That's what I was thinking also. When she said that, like Southeastern region.
As far as the girls' experiences.
I agree with you. I was thinking the exact same thing. I think that is, you're right, it could be both another piece or even a teaser, because I think those experiences are very different.
At least I would think they would be.
I think so too.
A southern black girl's experience may be different from a northern white girl's, black girl's experience.
I'm just thinking about the experiences from it.
Yeah.
People who were very different, coming from different places. So.
But I'm not sure that their schooling experience was any different.
Right, but I wonder whether maybe other factors.
Right.
You know, the idea of socioeconomic or cultural.
I mean,
Well, you grew up in an area where Jack and Jill was really like
Buffalo,
prevalent.
New York, and Philadelphia,
Right.
and made that Jack and Jill, those kinds of social support systems, which would aid in racial identity development, that may have helped them cope, because that was actually the purpose of Jack and Jill.
That was exactly the purpose.
So that's really interesting.
And see, I think
And
you
I
can't
have found-
talk about this without talking about.
I know.
I know. Ready to say yes.
Well, and to be honest,
that's one of the outside forces.
I connected with Magic Johnson's daughter-in-law through she went to an independent school. Her kids are in an independent school, and she has created a group out in Los Angeles of independent school families that meet once a month to create a support system for themselves, and they go as a group to the schoolhouse when they have a problem. They advocate together. They become, and I actually recommended that one of the independent school parents at my school start a chapter here in Memphis around that same concept, because I have started the People of Color Independent Schools group here in Memphis. I started that a little over a year ago, where we meet, once a month, and we have come together and we are doing the career fair where we're trying to increase representation in the school. So it's their power in numbers, and so it may be interesting to see what that looks like, but this could actually end up being
We can find some resources to get you out there to LA to actually see this.
that group. Yeah. So this could go like this. Really fast.
I know. I mean, but that's because it's such
and I think
study.
because it's so
done.
personal for me,
Right.
and because I think about this, I talk about this, I live this. It's really important. And everyone that I talk to, from Dr. Bradley on down to my own daughter, thinks this is important. And are waiting for me to give information to people.
Right.
I think it'll help.
Like they think if I tell people something that's going to
No, I think it will be, especially parents who are trying to make the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited. But I love
About
definitely.
5 books.
You definitely do. Like you already have your research agenda straight
Yeah.
set. But I love the fictional narrative. Thank you all for
I
doing
know,
that
I
for the
think
big person.
Yes.
So,
Everyone has a purpose.
Yes,
right?
like I love it.
would there be any objections? I know typical in traditional phenomenological studies, there's a moment in the writing where the author brackets and kind of just puts themselves there in the reading and kind of tells their role and their involvement. Would anyone be kind of offended if we did that?
Not at all.
So there would be a section where we just call it epoch, where you lay who you are out there. So there's no, we know your slant.
Right.
We know your angle. And that's another way of kind of suspending yourself from personal on the study. So
That's one of the benefits of the qualitative versus the quantitative, is that you can do that.
Okay.
now I want to turn your attention to the proposed timeline. It is an aggressive timeline, but I want to explain to you kind of the logic. Before we ever convene again, I want to make sure you have in your hand the product for review at least 3 weeks from the date of that date. So if you look at the week of July 11th, or July 8th through 12th, submission of the proposal will be submitted to all of you. Which generally means she has to have that work to me a week prior. 3 weeks from that date, or 2 weeks from that date, I check in on you just to make sure that you have it, there are no glaring problems, and everyone, at least from that moment, is okay going into the meeting. The week of July 29th to the 3rd of August, we would have the proposal. Now during that time, during the 3 weeks when the work is out of our hands, Teresa and I will be working on a presentation and working on the preliminaries of the IRB form. We'll then also, after we walk out, if we're successful, and I've already reminded Teresa no one walks out unscathed, so we'll submit the IRB immediately if it's all clear to go, if there's any edits we need to make. Generally, if we do this the right way and we're solid with the IRB, we can get it in a week to 2. And we begin the data collection process. Right now, Teresa has access to more than 100 people who could qualify for the study. So being able to pull 15 should not be an issue, particularly we've communicated with them that this can happen or this is coming. We'll do heavy data analysis and writing during September with the hopes to send the final product to you the week of October 7th to the 11th. And then we'll follow the 3 weeks. From that point, I'll check in 2 weeks with you. And Teresa's requested October 31st as a final defense. And why, Teresa?
It's my birthday.
And I know that has a significant meaning. I defended on April 1st, 2016, which was my grandfather's birthday. He had passed at 101, but it was, that day has always been a special day for me, so I can say that I actually defended my dissertation on that day. So she's willing to put in the necessary work.
That'd be a great birthday present.
It would be. And I've also, just to let you all know, I've also adjusted my work schedule. I'm only working part-time, so I'm working 20 hours each week so that I can actually devote chunks of time during the week to this.
Wonderful.
And I
And
will
my
tell
school
you,
has supported that. They actually are paying me for 30 to then work 20
That's
to finish this.
I'm just checking this date to make sure.
Okay,
it's
okay.
correct.
and I will share with you that Teresa has been extremely diligent in getting her work done. Her work ethic is incredible.
Yeah.
Generally, if I give her a deadline, it's to me the day before.
Mhm.
So I have no problem in belief that she can make this deadline easy. We've set up weekly rotations of when work is due and we meet, so that she can send it chunks at a time and write within her passion. So if she has a passion to write on one particular section in the outline, she can do that. And we kind of work together, and I've shown her how to organize herself in Google Drive so she can have all of her information at hand. So we believe we have everything, we're ready to go. With your approval, we'd like to send a charge for her to go.
Have you thought about, are you gonna try to transcribe the interview yourself? Are you gonna use a transcription service?
No, I'm using a service that Dr. Robinson recommended called Rev.
Yes.
Okay, good.
I was gonna say that'll save you a lot of time.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I'm gonna use that, and so that should speed things up too.
They generally give feedback or response within 24 to 48 hours,
That's excellent.
and it's the best transcription service I've seen. It's a little pricey, it's $1 a minute, but the results are good.
Is that Rev?
Yes.
Yes. Have you used Rev before? Dr. Bradley?
No, I'm using it now.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
I'm using it now.
Okay, yes, the 31st is perfect for me.
Okay.
It would just have to be,
Earlier in the day.
you know what, now this, I don't know how you would feel about this, but it could actually, well, it doesn't, I can plan things around, but if you did it like kind of around this window, although you're already gonna have an audience full of people, but I have an AFAM Studies Research Methods course that's
Okay.
taught from 11:20 to
They can
12:45.
come.
Oh, right.
And I
Let's
think
do
it would be great for them to see.
Especially the section
Oh,
of
yeah.
the fictional character.
Yes.
Okay, so.
No, well, no, it's not lit, it's an interdisciplinary studies research course,
Oh,
AFAM Studies.
oh,
So
nice,
this would
okay.
be perfect for them, so if you did it anytime
So like,
between
you wanna say 11:30 then?
11:30, and I would make them sit in the back so they could, if they had to leave at exactly 12:45, they could, but that would be
Okay.
the perfect time
All right.
for me.
Will that work for you? I know Dr. Bradley, I know you're in transition too, so 11:30 on the 31st of October?
May?
No, October.
For her defense.
Oh, I'm
For
sorry.
defense.
I'll check and let you know, but
Yeah.
that far in advance, I don't anticipate an issue.
Okay.
And if not, I can reschedule the class and be here. I just wanna say that, that would
Yeah,
be
that'd
something
be
great
great.
for them to
Mhm.
witness.
Definitely.
And we will send you a notice for the proposal dates
Okay,
for that week. We'll just
Okay.
make sure you have at least a month or so in advance
okay.
to be able to zero in on a particular day at that time.
Sally, let me just share that October 31st is a special day for me too. That was the date my PhD was conferred.
Oh my goodness, that works out perfectly.
Celebrations all
I love the
around.
alignment, yeah, that's fun. Awesome.
So everyone, with that said, I thank you sincerely for sharing this time with us. I'm pleased that everyone is excited about this work. So now the heavy lifting takes place, and Teresa and I will proceed forward with making sure that the study goes off without a hitch, and I'll clear every path I can. So
Thank you all very much, I appreciate
You're
it.
very
Thank
welcome. Gonna do a great job.
Mhm.
Thank
Looking forward
you.
to it.
You got this.
Thank you, Dr.